Welcome to the 9th edition of FUSO Talks. So today we will take a look at the global state of education systems, how they have to change, what effects and what challenges are they facing. Certainly we all have prejudices and stereotypes that we are thinking of. US Ivy League schools are supposed to produce top performers, and potentially Indian public schools are considered to have huge classes, lack of teaching material, difficult conditions. Graduates of German colleges have the image of starting late into their job life and are too academic sometimes as they are viewed. And Japan produces great skills and engineers, but job starters are often perceived to not be really ready for the world. Are these all stereotypes? Is this all true? Certainly not. So our speakers today will certainly be able to talk about that and to tell us much more about this. And so I'm really excited to have you all here. Let me start to introduce them. So welcome on stage, Andreas Schleicher. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Please welcome on stage Dr. Hiroshi Suzuki, professor, sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just the first one. So welcome on stage Dr. Rahul Chadha. Thank you. Andreas, maybe let me start with you. I know you not by person for a long time, but I know the PISA test from the very beginning, because I exactly remember, I think it must have been 2001 when the first results were published in Germany. It was like a thunderstorm that went through all the official papers, because Germany wasn't there where everyone thought it had to be, on the top of the educational system, but it was rather in the middle field. And there was a lot of polemics around it, there was a lot of finger pointing, but I think since then, education really got on the global landscape. Knowing that you helped to create this test from the beginning and still oversee it makes me wonder first, it's a kind of job stability, talking about the fishing, that you don't find that often anymore. How often did you have to redefine and relearn what you were doing in your job?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. PISA is a good example. We almost have to reinvent PISA every 3 years, because the kind of skills that matter for people are actually changing very rapidly. So it's a constant learning process. Also, we learn from and with the countries that join. At the beginning, it was a very small group. Now it's over 80 countries around the world. So it's been a great learning journey. It's become also an inspirator and driver for curriculum change and instructional change in the countries. So.
Yeah,
it's been and for me personally as well, I must say. Every day I have the most interesting job in the world. I learn every day.
Talking about universities, of course, the PISA study focuses on the results of 15-year-olds who are doing the test, and that's basically measuring the success of a school system. But how closely are school systems and university systems connected? Do countries with great school systems automatically also produce good or prevent good universities, or is that a different field?
Well, you know, universities typically only educate a small academic elite, and you can do that by selection. So, but I do think without a great schooling system, a nation will not have the human talent it needs. It may still have some good universities. And again, the United States is an example where the school system is now quite poor by international standards, but some universities are still very selective, also by drawing on foreign talent. But I think actually you'll be very challenged today if you don't have a great school system to support your society and your economy. So, and what you do not learn by 15, don't expect that it's coming later. In fact, most of the learning, university included, that happens afterwards reinforces, but does not moderate initial skill differences. So actually getting things right from the start is crucially important. That's why I chose the age of 15 for PISA, not a later age. No?
So the foundation is the most important. Well, then I can't wait to hear everything about it. The stage is yours. Thank you very much, Andreas Schleicher.
Yeah, you know, as I just mentioned, in education, there are many things that we say. We all talk about education, but sometimes what we do is very different from what we say in education. And one of the things that we do in the OECD is track the actual learning outcomes. We don't care how much we spend on education. We look at what students can actually do. And in 2006, we started a series where we looked at the capacity of students to think like a scientist. Now, this is not about, biological knowledge and knowledge in chemistry, because those things change. By the time you graduate, most of that knowledge will be out of date. We wanted to know, can students think like a scientist? Can they design an experiment? No. Can they, distinguish questions that are scientifically investigable from those that are not? And when you think about 2006, it's very hard for us today to think that far back in history. No. But we know it was the year before the iPhone was invented. No. We didn't have smartphones in those days. No. Twitter was still a sound. No. The Amazon was still a river. Now, lots of things changed, but when you look in a country like Japan that has a very strong education system, progress in the capacity of students to think like a scientist has been very modest now. A few weeks more over those 3 years. And the world didn't stop in 2009, remember? Maps became dynamic, cars became electric. Actually, those were the years where the first driverless car, something that I'm sure you're thinking about every day, they appeared in those periods. But again, the progress in education has been very modest. In a country like Japan, it is very successful. And if you think about the last 3 years, think about, robotics, cloud computing, biogenetics, big data, huge changes in the world of science and technology. And what you can actually see is education is starting to go backwards. And in the year 2012, 2015, we introduced something where we made our whole testing experience digital. You can see even a country like Japan, very advanced, had trouble catching up with that. Well, if you think that's only happening in Japan, if you look at a country like the United States, actually does a lot less well and has seen the same kind of trend. Flatlining progress in education in a dramatically changing world. If you look at Europe, the picture is not much different either. This is the world in which we live, a rapidly changing world and very little change in education. What is fortunate that you can see some countries that have bucked that trend. In Europe, for example, Portugal, the poor cousin in the south of Europe, big issues in the financial crisis, and they've kept moving forward. Or Singapore, they started where Japan was and keep moving forward. And some regions in China I can no longer put on the map because they are very advanced in their education effort. That should give us hope that change is actually possible. Let's have a look at some of this. The first one, can we educate everybody well? This is a chart where I'm going to show you in the United States, there's a huge gap between children from poor families, now they perform here on the PISA scale, to children from the wealthiest 10% that do quite well. And in most of the other countries, the gap is not quite as big, but it's fairly large. Now the question is, can we do something about this? And the answer is yes, actually. When you look at these children from the same social background who go to school in Singapore, they are doing as well as the average child in the United States. And I can actually say the 10% most disadvantaged students, 15-year-olds, in the region of Shanghai in China, they do as well as the 10% wealthiest Americans. Showing us that poverty need not be destiny. If we get the most talented teachers into the most challenging classrooms and the best school leaders for the toughest schools, we can make a difference. Let's get to the tougher challenge. How do we move from a world where we just talk about, static knowledge that we reproduce, to getting students to become creators of new thinking, of new knowledge? Why is this so important? Well, think about how the world has changed. On the one hand, you can see there's a dramatic rise in the share of people who are going to belong to the middle class. 9 out of 10 entrants to the middle class over the next 10 years are going to come from China and India alone. A lot more wealthy people, lots of more people who buy trucks, and lots of more people who are actually going to demand a better education. But look at the other side of the equation. We can also see that in the OECD area, the 10% top earners are now earning 10 times as much as the top percent bottom earners. If we want to bring that back, education is going to be a huge part of the equation. Our world is also becoming more diverse. You can see there are more and more people on the move in migration. This is worrying. we basically spend more and save less. And that makes our lives as individuals in our countries, as systems, a lot more vulnerable to external shocks. And then, of course, digitalization. We have now more broadband connections in the OECD area than there are people. And that is fueling the rise in artificial intelligence. Here, in your company, you can see the more we move to a digital environment, the more actually people feel, I need more learning, more training. Often we think, digitalization is threatening jobs. It's, taking something away from us. But actually, in the world of work, digitalization has added a lot to the way we work and how we work. Now, we need to capture those forces and combine them with a good level of skills. Today, education is no longer about teaching you something, but to give you a reliable compass and the navigation tools to find your own way. Whether technology will destroy more jobs than it creates, people don't know. But what is very clear that we can actually get most people in today's world into this next world if we do a better job with giving them chances to educate, to develop that kind of skills. And that also means we have to become better at certifying the kind of skills that we need. In the past, we relied very much on initial credentials. I'm a good example. I have a very good qualification in physics from university. If you put me in a laboratory today, I'm probably going to do a dismal job because, the field of physics has evolved a lot over the last 20 years, and I've probably also forgotten a lot of the knowledge that I didn't use. But that's still, what appears in my CV and things like that. And not very good in recognizing the incremental learning that people do every day. That's true in companies, that's true in institutions. We need to become, if we want to make the lifelong learning society a reality for all, we need to do a lot better in recognizing the learning, digital badges, lots of mechanisms that you can use at the workplace to get us closer. There are big challenges. The world is changing much faster than our school systems today, and even more our university system. There's an opening gap between. But I do think we have the means and the tools to close that gap. And in some countries, we're seeing a lot of that happening today. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you, Andreas. That was a rapid and really interesting tour through the educational systems and challenges of today. You said that some of the surprising countries basically, or there are countries that surprise us where you have more hope than with the traditional, let's say, G7 countries that we would assume are first. And what are the secrets of those countries that have moved the most, basically, within the PISA study?
I think there are several dimensions. First of all, is the value that we do place on education. As parents, as society, is this important for us? No? The second thing is those systems that are moving fast. They have made teaching not just financially but intellectually attractive. They get really the best and brightest into education to become the engineers of society. They make wise spending choices. For example, when they have to choose between a smaller class and a better teacher, they invest all of their resources in the quality of learning environments and the quality of the people now. And that's very deceptive because we as parents push people into smaller classes, and actually that's not what science supports. They use technology, not superficially, throwing tablets into classrooms, which produces no result, but actually using technology in the background to support, to facilitate learning. They actually change the paradigm of learning from, the teacher being a teacher towards becoming the mentor and the facilitator and the coach. And so I think those are really quite clear common characteristics of systems that have, made the grade.
When we talk about Japan, we don't talk about a minor player in the global landscape. It's, I think, the world's third largest economy. It has a long tradition of education, and especially also in engineering, operations, production, Kaizen, also mathematics. The Japan's academia has a very good image when it comes to this knowledge. But the problem is often that all that knowledge is basically tucked away on this island here, and has never managed to influence the world in a large sense due to the language barrier to a certain extent. Is the Japanese education system today ready for the globalization in the 21st century?
Yeah. So from 2020, so next year, so we will totally reform the education policy. and especially it's mainly that we will redesign the national curriculum, and also at the same time, so we will totally redesign the universal entrance examination. So which include not only the hearing, not only the reading and writing skill, but also the hearing and speaking skill as a universal entrance examination. And also in the primary school, elementary schools, we will introduce the subject of the foreign language, cultural communication.
You worked for the Japanese government as a deputy minister and in the Ministry of Education and Technology. And you are today a professor at Keio University and Tokyo University, I believe. What would you say, looking at today's students, are the biggest traits of your students? If we would look at hiring them here at Mitsubishi, what would you advertise your students? What is the biggest trait? And maybe also, what are the shortcomings, if you could say that so in general?
Actually, normally, generally speaking, Japanese students are not so willing to make a startup company, but especially in the Tokyo University, the Keio University, totally, young generation and mindset has been changed. Actually, already in Tokyo University, over 400 startups from the Tokyo University, and 100 from Keio University, especially in the digitalization and bioinformatics. But so now we are trying to prepare. So the only 2 universities are very interested in starting up. That's why we focus and concentrate in how to bring up, cheer up the Kyoto University and Osaka University and Tohoku University. So Japanese government has started up the universal fund to supporting the startup. But dramatically change the mindset. Current situation.
I can't wait to hear more about what you have done in the past year in the Japanese education system, what we can look forward to in the Japanese education system. So the stage is you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Hiroshi Suzuki.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for inviting me. So my name is Kan Hiroshi Suzuki. Please call me Suzukan. In Japan, so many Suzuki. Yeah. And actually, I would like to explain about the outline of the Japanese education situation and the essence of Japanese education reform. So this is a chart of the Japanese situation of the PISA. So in 2003 and 2006, so this is a line is reading. Reading was low, but since 2009, so Japanese education has dramatically also improved. This is a chart of the mathematics. Mathematics is very important for the AI era. So please look at the level 5 and the level 6. So Japan is over 20% of students up to over the are very high performing. So this is the essence of the national curriculum reform plan from 2020. So we will totally introduce the active learning in the independent and the interactive profound learning in the elementary school and the junior high school and the high schools. Yeah. And especially in the elementary school, we will introduce activity in foreign language, cross-cultural communication, and programming thinking. And junior high schools subjects themselves are not so changing. Not so will be changed. But in the high school subject, we will totally redesign. So that we will introduce a new subject, so-called inquiry of science and mathematics, and inquiry of social studies. This is very important. And the active learning is totally connected and has a very close relation with project-based learning or problem-based learning in real society, real world. We are calling it the PBL. Entrance examination system used to be So current system is totally depending on the memorization. But we must change entrance examination to be the under entrance examination which test ability to think, judge, and express. We will totally introduce a AO admission office type of entrance examination. Actually, so Keio University, only Keio University has been doing such AO type admission office type education entrance examination. But very few national universities are doing such a entrance examination. But we will make 30% of national university capacity to admission office type of recommendation, so which assess the ability of PBL and the inquiry learning. So from 2020, so inquiry-based learning and the project-based learning will be prevailed to the all types of high school students. But so most problem is how to unlearn the current high school teachers and how to re-educate high school teachers' mindset. So from the teaching to learning support, facilitate and connect, organizing the project-based learning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation that had a lot of new learnings for me. I have a question from the audience that is relating to the state of Japanese teachers, and it says it's been, from a discussion this person with Japanese teachers, it seems that there is a problem with teachers' qualities. It seems to be very easy, or used to be very easy, to get a license, and you find a lot of, amongst the better teachers, burnouts and basically being overwhelmed by all the job pressure that you have. Is that something that you're aware, that you see the same way, and how is that addressed?
Maybe Andreas can explain more, but among 35 OECD countries, Japanese teacher level quality is good. Quality is good, but quantity is a problem in Japan because of the deficit of a budget. Mm-hmm. And the student to teacher ratio still not good compared with the other countries. Actually, so the high school principals are pressured by parents. Yeah, so they are very anxious about the response from the parents. So parents still think that so the memorization and routine routine work accuracy is very important. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why always I show the list of the missing jobs. Yeah. Yeah. So if we continue to stay this 20th century type of education, so new generation cannot take a job at all. Mm-hmm. From now on, so for example, automated pilot driving, so that not only engineering but also the lawmaking and economics and the ethics. So total, so integrated interdisciplinary academia. So learning is will be very important. So Japan will contribute to the solve the real world problem. Yeah.
Okay, well then we can look forward for a very changed Japanese education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Rahul, your work rather focuses on higher education, and when I read about your work, the first thing I wondered was that you advise universities in their fight for the best students. And that, to someone who doesn't work with that every day, comes surprising, because from a student's perspective, the viewpoint is mostly exactly different. It's, will my favorite university accept my application? Will I be getting the chance to go to the situation? But apparently, even top universities have to compete for students today. And is that a recent development, or has that always been the case?
So I would say that the fight for talent, the war for talent, has been existing for decades. The nature in which that competition happens has been evolving. And that has been changing because of the funding structures, how they have been changing, the ambition of universities around the world to become world class, so improve their quality and ranking, which was also mentioned by Suzuka. So there is that demand and supply equation which is changing on both sides. While for the top universities, there is always more demand from the student side, there is more competition, but at the same time within those universities, there is competition to get the top talent. And so there is that constant search for the best fit between the university and the student. But then as you go down the hierarchy, there is more supply of universities, there is more supply of students, and that selectivity and competition is less so.
Looking at the US and especially California, where you reside, is or has become, maybe always was, the land of entrepreneurs. And some of the most successful, just naming Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, obviously, are university dropouts. So do universities maybe no longer teach the relevant topics to students to become successful today, or is there maybe a new type of university that is needed?
Great point, yeah. So there are outliers for sure, and those outliers by definition create disruption by being outside the normal system. And the examples of Bill Gates and Zuckerbergs of the world are clearly an indicator of that there is something which can be done even outside the higher education system in terms of experimentation, entrepreneurship, and innovation, and taking risk, which is our higher education system does not encourage, because universities themselves are risk-avoiding entities. Mm-hmm. So I would say yes, that there is an opportunity, but we cannot discount the power and the influence of higher education. It has been proven through several empirical research that higher education, someone who holds a college degree has much higher likelihood of success in their life in terms of all measurements, right from the financial impact, but also to the personal, socioeconomical, health impact.
I can't wait to hear it and would like to welcome you on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Rahul Chandler.
Thank you very much, Florian, for inviting me and introducing me to this panel. As Florian mentioned, that I'm based out of San Francisco Bay Area, and most of my work had been focused on higher education as a sector. I'm an analyst and a researcher of the field of study of higher education. And what I'm going to talk to you today is about the future of higher education and its alignment with the future of work. Is higher education ready to change? Higher education definitely changes the lives of individuals and societies and people, but by characteristic, by the DNA of higher education, it is resistant to change. It has quite a solid immunity to any kind of change. And tradition is very powerful in academia, not only in terms of how it governs its systems, processes, behavior, and its ambition, but also how it interacts externally. Externally with the employers, externally with the regulators, and so on. India is one of the countries where higher education system was developed very early on. Yet, now it is at a place of sheer crisis. The system has not evolved, adapted, or prepared for what's coming. And there is a need to rapidly transform and change that. Of course, you know the population with 1.2 billion people, it's the second largest country in population, which is reflected in its enrollment and the structure of higher education. If India, at some point of time, try to match What's the gross enrollment ratio of Japan and Germany is? It has to add 50 million more students in higher education system, 50 million. And if you take an average of about 5,000 students at a university, we are talking 1,000 new universities to be opened in India. Now that's the big gap. But I'm taking an example of Indian higher education, what I just shared, to share 4 characteristics which should be critical for policymakers and institutions and even employers who are thinking to hire talent from higher education to think of these 4 characteristics: that the education system should be flexible, affordable, inclusive, and relevant, which translates into it should be a fair system of higher education. The first example of flexibility is in terms of online learning. Now, students in India have an opportunity to take online courses as a part of their engineering curriculum or any undergraduate curriculum. The important thing is these are awarded and vetted by the government of India, which means that no university in India can deny the credits which are earned through online education. The second example I want to share is in terms of affordability. Not a large number of Indian students are studying abroad, but of those who are, in last few years, there has been a massive shift. US remains a leading destination. Now, a lot of them, especially in professional fields like engineering and medicine, are actually going to China, a country which has English taught programs now to attract global talent. And actually, Chinese universities are offering now more affordable education, medical education, than Indian universities. The third element is about inclusivity, and this is about making sure that many disadvantaged students of the segments of the society have equitable access. Government of India went ahead recently and added another 10% of the seats in higher education for economically weaker section, EWS, which means they created more than 3.5 million additional seats in higher education for students who are coming from low economic strata of the society. So, moving forward, higher education system should enable inclusive access to a large segment of the population, even in terms of financial ability to access education. This is the last slide, relevance. So this is the final R, that education system should finally relate to what's happening in the society, what's happening in the economy. What is also happening is that the society needs change leaders. It needs people coming from beyond engineering to solve the problems of the society, which I have talked about. This is one example of a university, a complete outlier, which do not have an engineering program, which does not have an MBA program, which has nothing to do with technology and business. It is focusing on social sciences and social change leaders. But believe me not, this is the richest information technology founder of Wipro Technologies in India, who has given up $21 billion to establish this university. To sum it up, the final slide is my argument that higher education has a transformative power on individuals, societies, and economies. It is one of the most significant influencers in our lives. We should always keep in mind the 4 characteristics when we are designing the future of higher education, and that is, it should be flexible, affordable, inclusive, and relevant. Thank you very much, and look forward to Q&A.
I think that education is the key factor for the progress of the country, besides maybe infrastructure on the other hand. And what holds India back from being probably the most powerful, or maybe second most powerful economy in the world. But the access to base education, to school education is still poor, especially in rural areas, and that starts with basic knowledge about hygiene and really not school-related topics up to literacy, and then of course preparation for school and higher education. Are there strategies to tackle this problem?
I would say that it's an evolution, it's a journey, and there's definitely progress. And as Andres also mentioned on his presentation, there is lot more happening at the K through 12 space in terms of the government engagement than in higher education and tertiary education. So access remains a big challenge in high school level in India. But the government policies have been shifting as the resources are always limited. But one of the biggest changes this government made was to look into the compulsory education until primary education, which was not even existing prior to it. But like any other cultural change, the adoption takes time. So I would say that two things are happening. One, at the large scale policy level, which the government is trying to bring, and there is a positive traction on that. The impact of it has to be yet seen and felt on a day-to-day basis, but the intention is there. But the second level of change is bottom up, from the family, from the home. What are the changes we are bringing? And that cultural change actually is coming from a completely unexpected and unintended place, and that is WhatsApp. Which means that the societies are, the Indian society is now a lot more connected, even in villages, through communication channels with the cultural and mindset changes which never existed earlier. So the coming of these two forces together, from government policy level on one side to bottom up from the families to outside, will really bring the best change which is needed in India over a long to medium time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I thank you very much to our speakers for having been here. I think tremendously interesting and lively. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to FUSO Talks.